Welcome to Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. Here we explore the training and development of America's leaders in the application of air power and the profession of arms. The views expressed are those of the hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government.
Welcome back to another episode of Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. I am Colin Slade.
And I'm Reed Gann, and we're your hosts for Commission Ed.
All right. Today we are bringing you Lieutenant Colonel Adam Jung. He is a friend of mine from Air Force ROTC. We have spent a couple years around each other within the enterprise and at field training. And I've always been impressed by his demeanor. He's a super humble, very approachable guy, despite being a bag wearer. He is a pilot, and yet he never came across to me as someone who wore his wings out in front of everything else that he did. Rather, he always struck me as an officer and a gentleman first and a pilot second.
One of my favorite things about being in AETC when I was in it is the exposure you get to such a wide variety of career fields. Typically, when you're in the combat Air Force, if you will, you're going to be even more insular and in your tribe. And it's meeting folks like Colonel Jung that make it all worth it, right? You work with an air battle manager, you work with a pilot, you work with a CE guy, you work with a contracting officer, and the list goes on. That was a real treat. That was a real treat for me. And so, yeah, I can totally see the attraction there.
Yeah. He has recently retired, which you will hear about in the interview. But over the course of his 20 plus years in the Air Force, he was involved in numerous different, not just experiences, but career fields. He was an air battle manager at one point, crossed over, became a pilot. But before I give the whole story away, why don't we just turn it over to Lieutenant Colonel Adam Jung? Well, do you want me to call you sir, or do you want me to call you Adam?
Just Adam's fine.
All right, Adam. Welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you here, especially knowing you and your experience and your ability as a communicator, as an officer. I definitely wanted to have you on the show to share your experience across the Air Force, but also on the topic of retirement. But before we do that, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Baby Adam comes into the world and somehow decides that he wants to get into the Air Force. If you wouldn't mind, kind of walk us through how you got to that point.
Okay. First, thanks, Colin. I was pretty surprised when you asked me to do this, and I'm like, what? So I really appreciate it and kind of honored to be here. So thank you. I grew up in a small town in Wyoming, not the good side of Wyoming. It was flat plains, pretty small town. It was 5,000 people. So I had about 100 in my graduating class.
What town was that?
Torrington.
Torrington.
Have you heard of it?
It sounds made up to me.
The only reason people go through there is if they're coming from Colorado north to Sturgis. So in Torrington, I wanted nothing more than to get out of Torrington. And I had a tight group of friends, and we all kind of got together and we're talking about how we're going to get out of there. And one applied to the Naval Academy, and he got in. One applied to the Air Force Academy, he got in. And I just couldn't see myself going to an academy. I didn't want to do that. I wound up applying for an ROTC scholarship, and I got it. And then with that, and it's pretty much the same as it is now, you're kind of tied to your in-state school. So that didn't really help my cause of trying to get out of Wyoming. So I'm kind of still dreaming, but really expecting that I'm going to go to University of Wyoming, which ironically, from when I left Wyoming to pretty much now, I wanted nothing more than to come back to this area. So that's kind of where I'm at, like right now, and where I'm going to retire. But at that time, I wanted nothing more than to leave. So I got this ROTC scholarship, and then I got a letter in the mail from a university that I'd never heard of. And it said, we'll pay for your first year, we'll pay for your room and board, we'll pay for your books, and we'll pay you a stipend.
Sounds amazing.
Scholarship, and it worked out really well. And there's still a detachment there. I haven't been back to the university since I left it. They're actually in our region. It's in Chicago, Illinois Institute of Technology. So that's kind of what inspired me to get going with the Air Force, is to get out of Wyoming, to be honest. I outlasted the other guys. My buddy that went to the Naval Academy, he wound up doing the Marine option, became a Marine officer, did that 4 years, and now he's kind of upper management in corporate America. And then my other buddy went to the Air Force Academy, and he graduated a year behind me, and he went to fly C-130s. And then he had a medical issue, and now he works for General Electric. So I would quantify myself as kind of a late bloomer with the Air Force, because I really didn't know what I was getting into. My whole goal was getting out of Wyoming, and I was what I've now heard called the stealth cadet. I didn't spend a whole lot of time participating in ROTC. I did the minimums. I was very quiet. I wasn't very involved. I was intimidated by the whole process, and I wound up getting my degree in civil engineering, and I hated it. I hated it the entire way, and I sucked at it. I barely made the minimum grades. My second semester, my freshman year, I didn't make the grade, so I didn't get or actually it was my first semester of my sophomore year, so my scholarship got deactivated. But I foraged along, and I wound up kind of making it. But it was a lot of work, and it was just not an enjoyable experience until my senior year. That's when I really started to really like it, and I decided that I wanted to be a civil engineer in the Air Force. So, yeah, by the time I got to that point, I was really digging it, and I won't even say I wanted to be in the Air Force. I just wanted to be a civil engineer. All my friends were not in the Air Force, and I remember, they were getting jobs in downtown Chicago, and I was looking forward to that. I filled out my dream sheet, and I put civil engineering, civil, general. I think there was 3 different types of civil engineering I put. And then I think I put mechanical engineering. And then I wanted to be an engineer. And then on the very bottom, number 6, air battle manager I put. And the assignments came out, and I got air battle manager.
Of course you did.
Yes. And I remember very distinctly my commander notifying me of that. He goes, yeah, I don't know what this is, and I don't know what they do, and I have no idea what this career field. All I know is the training's in Florida. I'm like, okay, sweet. So that was my first assignment down at Tyndall Air Force Base in Panama City. So I guess to kind of back up on my story, I met a girl in college, and she came down to Panama City with me. And about 3/4 of the way through the training, it's 9 months of training, and down there is where I really was like, this is awesome, and I love this. I like it a lot. A lot of the things that I didn't like about ROTC were kind of irrelevant at that point. I didn't like marching. I wasn't good at it. I did not like, standing at attention and all the stuff that I thought the Air Force was. I didn't like ironing my blues, and I wasn't very good at all that stuff. Yeah, I was just intimidated by it, and I didn't like it. And once I got there, I'm like, what? This isn't it. This isn't at all like what I thought it was going to be. I saw that there was a mission, and I saw a bunch of professionals that did it, and we were doing something cool. So I really liked the training down there. I met some awesome second lieutenants that I'm still in touch with. We just did a old man trip. Me and there's 4 of us. Two of us are retired. My other buddy, the one that down at training, he was the lieutenant that we always said was either going to retire as a first lieutenant or be a 2-star general. Yeah. He's on his way. He's a vice wing commander at a large base now. So about 3/4 of the way through, we get our assignments, and I got Tinker, Air Force Base, Oklahoma. It wasn't on my list, but that's where you go as an air battle manager. That's kind of like the motherland. And at that point is when my girlfriend at the time was on her computer, and I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, I'll put my resume together, and it was her resume for jobs in Chicago. I'm like, what? Oklahoma. She's like, I'm not going to Oklahoma. So at that point, that's when we got pretty serious, and I drug her along to Oklahoma, and she became my bride in Oklahoma, and we're still together. But we go to Tinker Air Force Base, and didn't know anything about Oklahoma City. Wasn't really looking forward to it. And it turned out to be great. Really liked it, and kind of established, I think, those first set of friends and company grade officers that I got to associate with, those created that bond. It isn't like that at any other assignment. Did you witness something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Perfect example is my co-host Reed. We met at Air and Space Basic Course, ASBC, and we're in the same flight, hit it off there. We've never been stationed together ever since, but we've stayed in contact the whole time. So I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just you're young and you just throw it all in there, but everything after that, I've had good friends and coworkers and acquaintances, but never that kind of bond that I had in training and then at Tinker for that first assignment. And maybe it's just as your family progresses, you start having kids and you start kind of living that other life. But Tinker was great. I came into the Air Force kind of at a time after Desert Storm. There was a lot of big drawdowns. So by the late 90s, we were starting to see AWACS. They were tired because they were doing Operation Southern Watch and Northern Watch, just repeat cycle. So when we showed up there, it was kind of a ghost town, and they started to infuse it with a bunch of lieutenants. So all the people I graduated, we were all there at Tinker. And I remember just a bunch of second lieutenants and then a bunch of weary first lieutenants, because they had kind of gutted, the Air Force had kind of gutted the majors and field grade officers. So the first lieutenants were running the show, and they were beat down from just getting crushed for 2 years deploying. And we were just excited to be there. And I remember just really wanting to deploy and getting to kind of that salty, so I could be like them. And I got my chance.
Yeah, just looking at your beard right now, it looks like you earned all those white hairs.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my first beard. So I had no idea, but I like it.
and very well deserved.
So Tinker is kind of where I really, as an air battle manager, I got to do some really neat things as a second lieutenant and as a first lieutenant. Right off the bat, I got to be deployed to Northern Watch. And that was great. That was in Incirlik, Turkey. And it was called a deployment. But looking back, knowing what I know now, that was a party. We bought rugs and brought them back on the airplane. We bought shotguns. We bought, all kinds of stuff. And it was really literally a party.
Yeah. Disclaimer, that's not possible now. Don't have any expectation that that's something you're going to be able to do in the Air Force.
Yeah. Just the camaraderie and the friendships and we were doing a neat mission. That was where, Iraq still had airplanes and they were flying them around, and we were looking at them and we were doing our job, what we had trained to do. We were engaging bad guy airplanes, and it was cool. So that was a lot of fun. And then probably a pivotal point for me happened at Tinker. That first deployment's where I really realized, like, whoa, I really like this Air Force, and I want to be a pilot. So I was told early that I've always had glasses and I've always had kind of bad eyes, but just talking around, like, there's a waiver process. So I kind of got that bug in me at that point. When we came back from that first deployment, my good buddy, who's still in the Air Force, he's an 06, he's the vice commander. There's a new squadron standing up, and he's like, we should do this. And he found out who the commander was. He's like, Adam and I want to come to this new squadron. And I'm like, what? And when the list came out, Kevin and I were both on it. And I think that was probably a very pivotal point. Go after what you want. And it turned out awesome. Getting to stand up a new squadron from scratch was just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, because everything is fresh. Everyone's excited. And we were put in jobs that were well beyond our rank and our abilities. But everyone came together, and it was just a good family atmosphere there. The Air Force was a little different then. Air Battle Manager wasn't rated like it is now, like a pilot or a combat systems operator or an RPA. It wasn't rated, so you didn't get flight pay, and you couldn't command a flying squadron. That was kind of a big thing. So they made this a rated position, and in doing so, they made some changes to the structure of the airplane, and some of the enlisted positions changed. And I got to be on the initial cadre of instructor controllers. And that was neat. That was cool. Once again, on the, at first, and with Kevin leading me along, charging forward. And that's where I got my application out. Biggest roadblocks, there was the med group commander, and he comes in and I said, sir, I'd like to get an initial flying class 1 physical. And he goes, hand me your glasses. So I handed them to him, and he's like, no, these are as bad as mine are. This test is 80 man hours, and I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste my technician's time, and I'm not going to do it. Why do you want to do this? And I told him, sir, I don't want to be, your age, wondering what might have been if I didn't try. I want to do this, and I'm committed to do whatever it takes. And he's like, well, I guess I was convincing enough. I didn't sound convincing just now, but I poured it out to him. And he wound up going through with the test. And I remember when I got that waiver for my excessive refractive error, I felt like I was a pilot that day. And I remember going in and told him, like, sir, I got it. And he's like, what? That was kind of another moment that was pretty cool. Another big thing while I was in AWACS, I was at Northern Watch when 9/11 happened. And I was just happened to be at the right place at the right time to be involved in some pretty cool stuff. From 9/11 to October, it was the first week in October, we organized and planned all these missions to go into northern Afghanistan. And getting to be a part of 2 of those, it was very surreal and unprecedented. A strike package with AWACS in the middle, with fighters, and doing humanitarian assistance to the Northern Alliance and the people there. That was just pretty neat, flying through all those stands that we had never flown up to that point. And by that point, I get tagged with another deployment to Thumrait, Oman. And right before the deployment is when I found out that I was selected for pilot training. And went out and did the deployment. It was actually a lot of fun because I knew that I was going to pilot training when I came back. While we were there at that one, there was all this talk about Operation Iraqi Freedom kicking off in 2002, 2003. And I was only supposed to be out there for half the deployment and come back at 60 days. Everyone else was 120. And every day at everything, I said, have your bags packed, be ready to go. We're probably going to go to PSAV to kick this thing off. And I wound up squeaking out. My entire crew went to PSAV, and they were gone for 11 months doing that, the initial kickoff. So I remember leaving and like, holy crap, they're gone. So when I got home, I remember turning my headset in. The DO was left, and he's like, I said, sir, you're the only one here. I'm planning to go to pilot training in 2 weeks. And I was half expecting him to say, like, no, you're not. You're staying here. We need you, because everyone was gone. And the whole Tinker Air Force Base was gone. And he's like, give me your headset, turn in your crap, and I don't want to see you again. So that's when I went to pilot training. So pilot training, I was really used to talking on the radio. That's what you do in AWACS. You talk on the radio. But I wasn't expecting to suck so bad and for it to be so hard. So it was very challenging and difficult, and I wasn't very good at it. And one thing that I was very certain that I wasn't going to go back to Tinker and fly AWACS. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do anything but fly AWACS. So I wound up getting C-130s, and it was great. I went down to Corpus Christi, flew with the Navy, and I think that's where I learned how to fly. My time in Enid, you're so worried about leaving the airspace or, doing something, busting your altitude floor, that I never really got the time to focus on flying the airplane. And I remember very distinctly in the King Air down there, it was a Navy lieutenant. And I'm like, sir, I will put the tack hand to the left bearing, and when I get within 5 radials, I will immediately make a turn back to the center of the airspace, and I will put the tail of the VOR on the other radial, and if I get within 5 radials, I will turn back. And he's like, what are you talking about? Fly the plane. We're over the ocean. If you get close, somebody's going to come on the radio and tell you to turn back. And that's kind of the first time where I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I really like to fly. So just like anywhere else, you have the dream sheet. I filled out the dream sheet with Germany and Alaska again. Another shot to go back to Alaska. Little Rock was not on there, but that's what I got. Little Rock, Arkansas.
Making your rounds to all of the garden spots in the Air Force.
Yeah. Oklahoma City, now we're at Little Rock. And Little Rock wasn't just a short stint for me. I wound up staying almost 10 years at Little Rock. I was able to bounce around. Little Rock's kind of the big base for the C-130s.
Yeah, I was going to say Little Rock is like the mecca for all things C-130, so that doesn't surprise me that you were there.
Yeah. Once again, there was a squadron that stood up, and this time Kevin wasn't there to lead me along, and I jumped all over that. And it was very similar to my experience in AWACS. Just awesome. People become tight when you're starting it. You don't have a lot of things, and you're just doing things for the first time. So I got to do that again. I would say highlights, that's kind of where, by this point, I had both kids, and one of them was born in pilot training. So we have our babies down there at Little Rock. We were deploying our asses off in the C-130. So what I thought was a deployment in AWACS wasn't even close to the tempo that you do in the C-130. Cool things. I got to be on our squadron did the response for Hurricane Katrina, and that was neat. We, the other plane that we took off with, set up the lights at Louis Armstrong, and we came in there, and we weren't really told what to expect, and it was absolute mayhem and craziness. I got to fly with the British exchange pilot, and he goes, "Adam, go inside and see where they want us to park and what we're supposed to do." So I go inside, and it's just mayhem. I can't find anyone that looks like they're in charge, and there's literally bodies in various stages of life and death, piles of trash, just absolute craziness. And finally, I find somebody in a Air Force ABUs and figure out, like, okay, here's what we have. We have a C-130, and we don't even know where we're supposed to go. And she kind of got us hooked up, and we wound up picking up a nurse, and we took, I think on that first trip was like 40 people, and we took them to Charleston. Stayed the night, and we did it again, and we were kind of bouncing between San Antonio. I did an Alabama trip, and I just remember it was crazy. Like, people didn't have shoes on. They had all their stuff in a garbage bag. And I remember a baby that had like soggy diapers and coming off the airplane with just enough energy to give them to the medical person. So that was kind of a very interesting mission. Got to do that for a week. And then just a series of deployments. Kuwait, and then Balad. So I spent in Iraq. I feel like I could still map out every crack in the taxiways for most of the runways and taxiways in Iraq. I got to finish in the schoolhouse teaching new C-130 pilots, and that was just, I love that. So here's where I'm all grown up. I'm a major now, and I was the chief of stand-about. We just had an inspection. I love that. I love the teaching, and I love being in stand-about doing that. And the squadron commander was like, "Adam, there's an opening, wing exec, and I'm nominating you." And I'm like, "Sir, I don't want to do that." And he goes, "All right, I got it. I get you." So I went to the interview, and I pretty much was pretty honest. I'm like, "Sir, I really love what I'm doing. I love training new pilots, and I love being chief of stand-about." And I had kind of a wild card. At this point, I was selected to be a advanced agent for Air Force One. So I told him that I'm doing that. I just started it, and I'm going to have to travel a lot. So I don't think that where I'm at is very conducive to being a wing exec. And he goes, "Well, Adam, thank you for your candor. I really appreciate that." 3 months go by, and I got a call from the wing commander. He's like, "I know you don't want to do this. Please." And I wound up doing that, and it was actually pretty good. I learned a lot, and from that perspective, working with the leadership team and just seeing what goes on at that level, here's where I really fell in love with email and time management, and just kind of being very deliberate with my time. And it was me and a captain. I was the major, and we kind of, when we sat down, we're like, "This is going to suck. How can we make it not suck?" And we said, we're each going to fly once a week. We're going to drink one beer on a Friday at 3:00. We're going to try to make it as fun as we can. And we did. And it was pretty fun. But that created a kind of a dilemma, because the wing commander, he liked us. We did a good job. And he's like, Adam, you need to go to the Pentagon. I got a buddy and he works in the engine room. And I'm like, sir, I don't want to go to the Pentagon. I kind of went into triage mode, and I contacted a buddy that he is in a small unit in Oklahoma City. And it's not at the base, it's at the airport. And he's like, yeah, if you want this, I can get you in. I'm like, yeah, I want it. And he goes, it's a headquarters Air Force job, but it's not at the Pentagon. So I went and told my commander, I'm like, sir, this is what I want to do. And he was disappointed. He's like, that's not a real half job. And I got it, and that's where I went. So I went back to Oklahoma City. But this was an awesome job. I got to teach advanced instrument school. So I was teaching in a class and in a sim. And then not only that, we got to fly a Learjet. So it was awesome. It was like a pilot's dream, really. There's only I think there was 6 or 8 pilots there. And a lot of air traffic controllers. We weren't on a base. We were on the FAA compound. It's called the Air Force Flight Standards Agency. It was at that point where I was coming up on, it was a 4-year controlled tour. And at this point, I had just made lieutenant colonel. So I made it, despite what people have told me, despite not going to the Pentagon. I did what I want. I switched career fields. I pretty much got to pick my path, and I made it to where I wanted to go. But now here I am, lieutenant colonel. I made my goal. Now what do I do? So I'm kind of not in the pool of the bright and shinies anymore. I'm not going to be a leader, as far as like a commander or anything like that. So now what I'm looking at is like a staff job where I'm a worker, or pilot training. And pilot training, at this point, my kids are in school, and my wife's kind of been, not abused, but I've been deployed a lot. So she's like, have fun in Enid, I'll stay in Oklahoma City. So I'm like, oh, well, that's not going to work. And then the Air Force comes out with an early retirement. I'm like, oh, never thought of that. Huh. Because I'm already at 15 years at this point. And probably not a bad idea. They released it at 12 o'clock. I was there at 12. I was the first one in, and got my name on the list for that. But it was denied. So that was kind of devastating, because it turned my whole mantra. I started getting my airline pilot applications ready, and I started looking at the future. And so that kind of completely changed my mental state. They're like, well, you could separate. I'm like, why would I do that? I had 15 years. But then I did it. I wound up separating at that point.
Wow, you did.
That was scary. I know that you were wanting to hear some about the retirement. The retirement was really easy, because I know what I'm doing now. At that point, I had no idea. I was pretty much leaving a secure job with a secure paycheck that pretty much guaranteed 05 retirement at that point. So I got a lot. I think it's more commonplace now, but at that time, people are like, you're crazy. Why are you going to do that? So I wound up staying in Oklahoma, and I wound up getting an IMA position. So I was a reservist doing the same job that I was doing active duty. So it turned out just great. I did that for 2 years, and the cool thing about it there is they fell under the Pentagon, or Headquarters Air Force, so there was no shortage of days and work opportunities. At this point, I was like, I'm going to be able to get an active duty retirement, because I'm getting enough days to do that. And then I was on my purse, and I saw the voluntary limited period of active duty. I was like, oh, this is perfect. I have about 3.5 years, and this would get me to my active duty retirement. Golden. And I saw Colorado State University, which is pretty much just up the road from where I grew up. My family's right here. My mom's 15 minutes away now. And just like kind of the trend, I immediately call the commander, I call the detachment, I call the POC, I call all these people, and I'm pretty excited. I'm going home. I call the unit. I'm talking to all the people there, the NCOs, all the officers, the commander, and they're like, "Yeah, this is great. Everything's looking good." And then I got a call, and they're like, "Yeah, we're getting an active duty person, so there's just no job here. You're not going to get a BLPAT at Colorado State." So pretty much the next year, I was looking at the hot jobs listing, and finally one day it came up again, and I had all my stuff ready to go. The interesting thing, I wanted to do ROTC since I was a major. And I remember calling then, and they're like, "No, you're a pilot. There's no way." So on active duty, there's no way that I would have ever been able to have the opportunity to go to ROTC unless I was a commander. So not only did I get to go to ROTC, I wasn't the commander. And then right around then is when I met you, Colin.
Yeah.
Wow. I wasn't expecting to talk that much.
Well, it's fascinating to listen to you walk us through your career in the Air Force, and because it just shows that there are so many ways to skin the cat of being an officer and the career path that you follow. And there is no such thing as the right way of doing it. I mean, throughout your experience, you had all these people telling you do this, do that. Some saying, in the positive, "Hey man, let's go do this." And I want to talk more about Kevin in a little bit, but he was a guide to you of, "Hey, let's go try these different things out," and those things turned out really well. And then there was a wing commander who's saying, "Hey, you need to go this way because this is how you're going to develop, and this is how you're going to become the leader that you need to be." And you didn't do that. Rather, you took control of your own career and made decisions, defined what success looks like for you and your family. And here you are today at the end of a successful Air Force officer career, having achieved retirement. So it just shows that if there is something that you want to do, there is a way for you to go and do it. You're the perfect example of all of that.
Yeah, I think that I remember, and I don't know if I've heard it recently, but the saying of "bloom where you're planted" or "grow where you're planted." I think I did the opposite. Do what you want. Like if you see something that you want to do, go after it. Don't think that you have to be just stationary. So I think I saw a lot of times in ROTC where a cadet would say, "Well, I want to do this, but I don't think I'm qualified or I'm not good enough." They never look at me. My grades are only a 2.9 or something. I'd be like, "Dude, no. Put your name in the hat. You just don't know." And there was even times where I'd be like, "All right, I don't think you're going to get this. Let's do it anyway, because you never know."
Right. You literally just never know, because we have no ability to peer into the future requirements of the Air Force and the black box gonculator there at AFPC or ARPC that is going to decide where and when people are going to go. We don't know the calculus, and to be perfectly frank, neither do the people who are making those decisions. And so there's always a chance that you could get that assignment that you want, or you get the waiver that you need, or you just happen to know the right person who knows the right person who can make that thing happen for you. So absolutely, I'm right there with you, 100%. Go for it, even if you don't think that it's a possibility.
Yeah. And then if it doesn't work, keep after it. I think ROTC, by the time the job opening came open, he didn't even know it was open again. But he's just like, "Geez, this guy's not going to go away. Might as well take him. He really wants it."
Well, that's awesome. Thanks, Adam, for taking us through your career. There are a few things that I want to go back and touch on. First of all, like I mentioned earlier, can we talk a little bit more about Kevin and the relationship? I mean, it just sounds like his role in your early success is really something that needs to be addressed, something that we need to highlight about surrounding yourself by good people who have your best interests at heart. And I just wonder if you can talk a little bit more about what was that relationship like between the two of you? What was it that drew you to him? How did you make that connection? Why did you give him the trust that you did to let him, I don't know, lead you, or at least push you, encourage you in those other directions?
I would say he's just a very genuine person. I remember he was the kind of guy that you're in a classroom setting and you might have a general officer come in, and he's the one in the back, that Lieutenant Coyle, that's asking this question, and it's a very valid question, but it's one of it's like, ooh, maybe somebody shouldn't be asking that.
How dare you put the general on the spot kind of thing?
Yeah, and I think that he's done that his whole career. And sometimes he puts his foot in his mouth and sometimes he doesn't, but he's always a genuine person, whether it's with his peers or with anyone. And that's what he's doing now. I watch him on Facebook doing his the COVID response, and he's just out there. He's an 06, but he's communicating, and I'm sure he's right there on the front lines making, doing the rounds at work. Another thing, I think that he just has an influence on people in a positive way, just through his genuineness and his ability to put himself out there.
Well, that's really great. I just want to emphasize the point here for our audience, the importance of having people like that around you that are going to push you, that maybe will make you feel a little uncomfortable, in that they're going to push you in a direction that you wouldn't want to go yourself. And that's actually one of my favorite definitions of leadership, is getting people to move in a direction and accomplish something that they wouldn't otherwise do on their own. That is what a leader often is that influence, either by setting the example or providing inspirational motivation, or whatever the case may be, the carrot or the stick that's going to get people to move in a direction that they wouldn't on their own.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go back even more to your time as a air battle manager. Let's learn a little bit about why that AFSC, that career field, exists. Give us the capability that career field provides to the Air Force, the application of air power, and kind of broad strokes idea of what is the role of the officer as an air battle manager.
Yeah. So the title explains it pretty well. You're managing the battle. So anytime there's air power out there, there is someone that is kind of tying it all together. So for example, as a C-130 pilot, I'm hauling my cargo. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. An F-16 pilot knows where they're going to expend ordnance. They know their track. They know when they're going to refuel, and they know what they're doing. The air battle manager brings all that together, coordinating all aspects of it, to include the adversaries, looking out on a radar scope to see what the adversaries are, and they're doing the ROE and determining where we need our assets to exploit the enemy. I really liked it. If I was going back, I would definitely do it again, because it's doing something cool. And anytime there's any kind of air or ground going on, there's an air battle manager involved with it.
Right. And if I'm understanding this correctly, you gave the example of the F-16 and the C-130 both doing their thing, but the two of them don't talk to each other.
Yeah, not necessarily. Yeah.
And so the air battle manager exists in order to deconflict those two.
They've got the master plan. That C-130 pilot might have their little breakout of the air tasking order, and just like every other asset, but the air battle manager has the whole big picture, and they actually, on the AWACS, is radar scopes, and they're communicating. It wouldn't be unheard of to have 15 or 20 or more aircraft on your frequency talking to them. Or I remember at a red flag, I was doing the search and rescue frequency. So I was monitoring helicopters, and at red flag, which is a big exercise that the Air Force does, it's mountainous in Vegas. So there's a lot of issues with the radios and connectivity, especially with low altitude airplanes and helicopters. And we got to fly. So on the helicopters. So on our days off, we'd go fly on the helicopter. And my buddy Seth, it was his day to go fly on the helicopter. So I was talking to Seth on the helicopter, and I was on the AWACS. And I remember I was brand new, and I can't hear Seth anymore, and I don't see Seth. And I'm the only one on the frequency, and I'm like, oh, geez, where's the, oh, no. And I'm telling the boss on there, like, hey, I don't see hover 6.5, and that's the one that Seth's on. I don't know where it dropped off my scope. And that's when I learned about terrain and what happens when a helicopter lands or is flying at 30 feet. But yeah, it's definitely a cool career field, and I would tell anyone that's looking that if you want to be involved and do cool things, you're not going to be in a cubicle, you're not going to be in an office, you're going to be flying and managing the air war. So it's definitely a cool career field. I would do it again.
Yeah, in my mind, I'm picturing you are the mastermind, moving all of these pieces, all of these individual units. You are the one in control of the entire thing, deciding where everything goes. And obviously you're going to receive direction from combatant commanders, or in a training environment, there will be a master plan that maybe you help to develop, but there in real time, as things are unfolding, you are the one who's making the call to the pilot in the F-16 or in the C-130. Hey, this is what we're seeing. This is where we need you. Go there now. And you kind of orchestrate and choreograph how that all plays out.
Yes, I would say that's the dream scenario. I mean, yeah. A lot of times you're there and you are monitoring, and that's what you are there for, because a lot of times things change, and you find out, for example, that mission in Afghanistan where we were dropping humanitarian, we had fighters, we had C-17s, we had Navy planes, there was 15 airplanes with us in the middle of it. We were all flying across the Black Sea and all the stands, and we get notification from the KOC that the coordinates have changed. So we're the ones that are relaying that. A lot of times, let's say F-22 has problems with refueling and they need gas, or the mission changes and all of a sudden things change. So you've got to kind of figure out, okay, we have this tanker, how much gas do they have? How can we make it happen? And everyone gets gas. So that's one of the things that I really liked, was kind of thinking on your feet and fixing problems.
Yeah, it's continuous problem solving. I mean, Never a dull moment, it sounds like.
And hours of boredom sometimes. I mean, there are times where there's nothing. And long flights. After 9/11, we were doing Mobile Eagles, and I think my longest was 18 hours.
Oh,
but
wow.
I had buddies that were over 20, and by that point, the porta potty in the back of the plane is pretty much at max capacity. You're spilling over.
Okay, so maybe there's some dull moments, maybe some not so great things about it. But even so, when things go wrong or change, you are there, part of it, helping to drive toward a solution.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a great way of quantifying it.
That's awesome. So one thing I like to always ask when I do these interviews is, so that's what you do, but who do you do it for? Who is the customer? Do you exist for that F-16 or that C-130 pilot, or who does the Air Battle Manager exist for?
I think they say, and it's very true, is that you're kind of the jack of all trades but master of none. So you know a little bit about every airplane. You know a little bit about the threat weapon systems, but you don't know everything. Whereas a C-130 pilot, I know everything about my plane. So one of the things that was kind of hard for me sometimes is that as an AWACS, you're not the primary customer. Like, say you're doing a training mission and you're taking off from Oklahoma City and Tinker Air Force Base and you're going to Langley on the East Coast, you're controlling fighters that are out of Langley. And to get there, let's say they take off at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, in order for us to be there, we have to, take off at, let's say, 5 in the morning. Well, in order to get off at 5, we have to show up at 3. We have to brief, then we have to go to the pre-flight plane. So in order to get there at 3, you've got to wake up at 1:30 or 2 to make it out there for the 8 o'clock mission. And then one thing that would always frustrate me as a lieutenant was, until I kind of saw the big picture, you'd get out there and, oh, we got our training objectives yesterday. We don't need to fly today, so we're not. So you're like, you're telling me I woke up at 1:30 in the morning to get out here and you're not even going to fly? So that was a frustration, but I would say that definitely, unlike the C-130, we weren't the mission. We were supporting so many different users. It's such a big thing. I mean, that's a career field that just supports, I think a lot of career fields do.
Oh yeah, it's operations, but it's operations support. It's in the AFSC itself. We've talked in this podcast about how AFSCs are designated, and the lower your number, the very first number in your AFSC, 1, 2, 3, 4, up through 7 or even 9, right, designates where you are in the spectrum of operations support, medical, that sort of thing. And the lower the number, the closer you are to the actual operational mission. And then the second number, same theme. So a 1-1 is a pilot of some sort, but a 1-3, and then in this case, a 1-3 Bravo, an air battle manager, well, that 3 means that you are another step removed from being in the cockpit, actually operating the aircraft. But you're still operations, still there being part of the overall operation and playing a role in making sure that mission comes off successfully, but albeit in a more supportive role. And so the progression of a air battle manager, obviously you didn't go through the full career as an ABM, but you can still give us kind of an idea of what the typical career progression for an ABM might be.
Right, yes. You start off, and they have a definite career progression where if you're in AWACS, you're going to start off as a controller, and you're going to learn how to talk on the radio. You're going to learn how to paint the picture, take what you see on your radar screen and describe it to one of our assets. And you'll do that for typically, I mean, the times may change based upon the manning needs and all that, but 18 months to 2 years, you do that. So you learn that. That's your foundation where you're learning really what it is to be an air battle manager. And then here's where you kind of branch out. You can be a senior director, and that person manages the controllers. So you might have 2 or 3 or 4 controllers, and you're a senior director, you're managing them. So you're listening to all the frequencies and you're helping them with what they need to do. So that's kind of the path that I was interested in going down. And then another one is ASO, which is a surveillance officer, and you're working with very young enlisted airmen, and his or her role is to tweak the radar and make it optimized for the given situation and see if a bad guy plane takes off. If that happens, they run the ROE, kind of a very important role.
So you say the ASO is managing these enlisted airmen. Are they like an actual direct supervisor for them, both administratively, or is it just in that particular operational context?
Just on that particular mission.
Okay.
And I it's been many years since I've been there. Things could be slightly different. I think things have probably changed a little bit with our kind of non-conventional scenarios that we're running up against in Afghanistan and Iraq now. So it could be slightly different, but you do, as an air battle manager, have a role where you're supervising others on the airplane. The third one is electric combat officer, and there you're looking at all the different emitters. So if there's a radar site or a surface-to-air missile site, or the ECO can figure out using the sensors and the equipment what it is. So it's kind of cool and a very huge asset to the airplane and to everyone else out there.
And is that different from an EWO, an electronic warfare officer?
They call it a mini RJ. So the rivet joint does the same kind of thing, but the ECO also has some capability on the AWACS. And then another officer position on the plane for an air battle manager is the mission crew commander. And this is kind of once you become a field grade officer, So kind of the hierarchy, like if you get assigned to be an air battle manager, you go to Tinker, you'll start off as a air weapons officer. You'll do that until you upgrade to either ASO, ECO, or senior director. And then you're going to be a captain probably by this point. You'll go do another assignment. You might do another AWACS. You might be an instructor. You might go to a ground unit, or you could go to JSTARS. Once you kind of get to the field grade officer rank, here's where you're a mission crew commander, and you're overseeing the entire mission.
And then later on, they have the ability to command squadrons, group command, wing command, just like you mentioned. Kevin is a vice wing commander right now. And then obviously they can promote beyond that and become general officer.
Yeah. And General Robinson's a good example of that.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, let's do a similar rundown of a career field, but this time, the second one that you picked up as a mobility pilot, flying the C-130. So that AFSC is the 11 Mike. Same question, why does the 11 Mike career field exist?
That's mobility. So it's all about mobility. And whether you're in a C-17, you're an 11 Mike, whether you're in a C-130, and it's all about moving personnel and equipment worldwide. So very big mission. And I just saw a C-17 that's hauling medical equipment from Italy to the United States. So they're involved with bringing masks over and anything moving equipment or personnel worldwide. That's what you do as a mobility pilot.
Moving stuff.
Yeah, moving stuff. C-130 is kind of unique in that it's a tactical airlift asset. So there's strategic and there's tactical. Strategic would be like a C-17 that does long range stuff. They can also do short range stuff, but the bread and butter of the C-130 is kind of like a bigger airplane, like a C-17 brings the stuff in, and then the C-130 delivers it to all the different little outposts. C-130 is just a phenomenal airplane that my first sim instructor said it can stop on a dime and give you 9 cents change. It can land on roads. It can drop people and equipment out on the side of a mountain in Afghanistan, and they're doing that right now. So it's a flying tank, and the kind of the path, you go to pilot training, and once you select C-130s and get assigned to a base, let's say you get assigned to Dyess Air Force Base, you would go to Little Rock first, and you would do the schoolhouse there, which is about 8 or 9 months. Starts off with academics, and then you learn how to fly the airplane. You do a bunch of simulators, and then you go into like the tactical environment where you're learning how to fly low level. You're learning how to do airdrop. You're learning how to fly with night vision goggles. You're learning how to do assault landings where you're landing on a very short strip, and you're learning how to just be a combat tactical C-130 airlifter. Yeah, very capable, and with the propellers, it can just climb and descend phenomenally, and it's not as susceptible to FOD or rocks or anything like that. So it really can land on a dirt road and thrive in that dusty environment.
I'm sure you had lots of opportunity for that sort of thing, especially with your deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah. One of the cool things they're doing is a precision airdrops now where they'll GPS guided with steerable chutes. And we got to be involved in that kind of at its infancy, where Afghanistan's just really rugged with big, sharp mountains. And we have troops that are out there fighting, and we were able to get their equipment and their ammunition and water and whatever they needed by airdrop. And it's high altitude, so you've got to be on oxygen, and you're trying to put a parachute on a postage stamp on the side of a mountain. And you can see our guys out there, and very rewarding to be able to get what they need out there on the side of a mountain.
Yeah, that sounds so cool. Okay, so that kind of gives us an idea of who is the customer for the C-130. Sometimes it's a group of soldiers on the side of a mountain, but broader strokes, bigger ideas. Who does the 11 Mike C-130 pilot exist for?
I would say, and I don't know if this is as big a picture as you wanted, but I felt like I was in the Army a lot of times because we were hauling a lot of soldiers and their equipment. So on a typical deployment, that's 90% of what we're doing is interacting with the Army. There was missions where they kind of owned us in those settings. It's a lot of times I felt like, I'm like, geez, why is the C-130 not in the Army? But I think the customer, it could be anyone. Geez, like now Air Mobility Command they're working for the American people, American taxpayers. They're bringing masks over and they're delivering them to New York City. It's a vacant ramp there. There's no planes flying in except for United States Air Force bringing in C-130s from Little Rock, and Dias brought in airmen medical teams to New York City. So I think that's pretty cool. And that's a mission that we're not doing like a military thing. We're working for the American people. The disaster stuff, anytime there's a hurricane, I got to do the Katrina stuff, but anytime there's, I got to do another evacuation down in the Bahamas. So anytime there's any kind of thing where we need to take action and move people and equipment.
And again, it's because of that capability, that flexibility that the C-130 has, that it can go and do this really tactical, very precise mission that maybe some of the other larger cargo aircraft can't do.
Exactly. Yeah. That one in the Bahamas, they canceled it at the last minute, but we were ready to do it. It was a 3,500 foot dirt strip, and we had to go over it because there was all kinds of animals that would be out there. And then there was a guy on a radio, and we were prepared to we had 4 C-130s that were planned to go up in orbit, drop one in. There was 300 families that were going to get evacuated. And at the last minute, they're like, Navy got it, because it was for the Navy. It's a Navy family. Yeah, I think the customer is all over the place.
It sure sounds like it. And how awesome and how rewarding that is then for you, the pilot, to have that, all these different experiences across the career, those highlights of things that you're able to get involved with that really make your career and the time that you spend in the Air Force very rewarding.
I think that it's not just the missions, it's the people that I got to fly those missions with. And a lot of the crews that I got to fly with while deployed, you just become, very, very close and just really good friends, where you can almost finish each other's thoughts, and you just kind of have the synergy where you know how everyone's doing, and you don't have to say a word, exactly where everyone's at, which I think I really liked.
Yeah. If you don't mind, you've already given us some stories that things that you've been able to do, but when you think back across your career, both as an air battle manager and as a pilot in the C-130, what are some major highlights or even lowlights that they can still be instructive that stick out in your mind that you'd be willing to share with the audience?
There's just so many examples, but one that pops to mind is kind of it was a very big learning point for me. And one of my first missions, we got to go to, we were doing HMX, which is the Presidential Support Helicopter Team, and we went into Quantico. And Quantico is a pretty small runway. It's only like 4,000 feet. And when I did the brief, I was a brand new aircraft commander. I think it was my first trip as an aircraft commander. So I was a little nervous, and like, all right, so it's a 4,000 foot runway. If I'm not down by, I can't remember what I said. If I'm not down by this point, call me around. So that's what I told the crew. Cool. So we're coming in there, and it was like gusty, and I could see the waters around the runway, and it was like bouncing around, and I'm a little nervous as it is. And we're kind of in the flare, getting ready to touch down, and the flight engineer, who also happens to be very new, very good guy and very good flight engineer, he goes, go around. And right when the D came out, like go around, the wheel touched down, and I stopped the airplane. And I was like, oh. So we pulled off the runway, and I was like, I know that you said go around, and I knew where the wheel was, and right when it was down, and I felt it was fine. And that kind of, it haunts, it's just something that I really learned, because there was no reason whatsoever why I didn't just go around if he said it. Even though I knew exactly where the wheel was, I knew exactly how close we were and how, safe it was. It was within my right to do that, but put yourself in his position. He was a staff sergeant, and I undermined him. Like, his opinion didn't matter after I told him to do something, and he did it, and then I disregarded it. So, that kind of stuck with me from that point forward. There was no reason why I didn't go around. We had time, we had gas, we weren't in a rush. There was just no reason for me to go around.
Where has that come up again, where you drew upon that lesson, thinking back to that staff sergeant, putting yourself in his position?
I think I just have become more conscious of that, there's always going to be many ways to do things. I might have a different way of doing something, and we might get to the same goal, but it doesn't always have to be Adam's way.
Yeah. I think it shows that while the goal is to always, number one, accomplish the mission, if there are multiple ways to accomplish the mission, you should find the one that is going to achieve the highest level of success for the team as a whole, not just for that one person or for a small number of the people involved.
Yeah. And there could be times where there's multiple ways of getting there. And if it means not doing it exactly my way, that's fine.
Yeah. And whether you're a pilot flying the C-130, or you're a civil engineer officer, or you're a maintenance officer with a team of crew chiefs, or whatever the context may be, if you know what the objective is and you have the time and the ability to find the best way to do it, it's your responsibility as an officer to work with your people, to listen to them and facilitate their success every bit as much as your own.
Yeah. I think we probably all, I know I have seen and been involved in scenarios where you're working for someone or with someone that always has to, it's like, let me have this one small win. It's like, does it really matter? So being able to see that from the other perspective, I know how difficult it can be.
Yeah. Well, good. Very teachable moment there. I can tell some good lessons to draw from that. How about another experience, this time on the other end of the spectrum, a huge highlight for you, something that really sticks out in your mind as something that you'll always be grateful for your time in the Air Force?
I got to be a Air Force One advanced agent, and it was probably one of the coolest experiences. I never imagined that I'd have this opportunity to do it. And essentially what it is it's a team that goes ahead of any presidential travel, and they do all the setup. So they coordinate the fuel for the Air Force One plane, parking spot, security, the stairs, any kind of equipment, light carts, working with the White House staff and the Secret Service. And I got to do that for 5 years, and I got to travel all over the world, working with really cool people. And this was while I was still at Little Rock in Oklahoma City. There's about 90 or so pilots that are part of this. And there's a scheduler, and you sign up and you pick your trip and you get to go do that. And just the experiences that I saw and got to, working with the crew of the Air Force One and seeing and being involved in this like super important no-fail mission was a neat experience. I enjoyed it a lot. And it was one of those things, just like I tell the cadets or anyone, I never imagined that I would be even remotely eligible or selected for this. And I was debating on doing it. And I asked my director of operations, he's like, yeah, you should do it. Do it. Yeah, let's put it in for it. And I never expected. And luckily I had an acquaintance who happened to know me and put in a good word. And I went out and interviewed in the Pentagon. Yeah, I got hired, and it's a 2-year deal. You get to do it for 2 years, and I got to stay on for 5.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Once again, going back to surrounding yourself with good people that have your best interests at heart and leveraging those relationships as you work to define success in a career for yourself.
That's a good lesson. And it's such a small Air Force. And if you can just be a good person, you never know when it's going to come back to you. Be a good person.
Yeah, it's true in the Air Force, but this is something that you can use anywhere that you may find yourself. Again, surround yourself with good people that care about you and you care about them, and let that also be a symbiotic relationship. Don't have it just be one way, all about me, but look outside yourself, because ultimately that's what we do as officers, is look to take care of other people.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, good. We've covered so many important topics, but I want to give you the ability to give some ideas about what was it that influenced your decision to retire, and what has that process looked like for you individually, for your family. Just kind of give us an idea of how all of that come about.
Yeah, I would say it was very nerve-wracking, and just the fear of the unknown. Air Force becomes very comfortable because you just know that the paycheck's going to, you got a job, and you don't even think of it like a job. I think once I kind of made that mental shift, I went into high gear, looking at putting a resume together and figuring out what I wanted to do and how I was going to get there. Cool thing about the Air Force, it doesn't matter what job you're going to be in, you're going to have skills that are marketable. You just got to market them. And we suck at that. We don't get any training. So I think what kind of helped me is I had friends that had taken the same maneuver and gotten advice, gotten people to look, and they're like, no, don't put it like this. This is too Air Forcey with acronyms, and it doesn't sound like what it should sound like. Nobody's going to hire you. When I was applying for United, I actually paid for a consultant to kind of go over interview prep, and it was worth its weight in gold. It was just so good, because I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. That does sound stupid. So it was definitely worth it. So if you're making a transition, whether you're separating or retiring, I would recommend that you start early and think about how you can market yourself outside the Air Force, because we don't think that we may not have these skills. Like, what does an air battle manager do that's translatable to a civilian? Well, you're leading, you're managing, and we do that in all the different careers in the Air Force. So that's a piece of advice for anyone that's looking to separate or retire, I would say.
Yeah, I highly agree. It's something that you need to start early and practice often. And by early, I'm talking like as soon as you come in, you need to understand and recognize and accept the fact that at some point you are going to leave the Air Force. You're not going to stay in forever.
Yeah, but that's lost on, we don't do a very good job on that. And we actually, it feels like you're a quitter or you're leaving. So we don't really promote it, but we should. It should be part of our professional development. And I think that by changing my viewpoints, it changed a lot about how I think about like customer service and making processes better and more efficient. When I left the Air Force and then came back in, I think the skills that I learned outside the Air Force helped me as an ROTC instructor, helped me counsel others. And so I would say, you mentioned calling mental, professional, and spiritual. How did I prepare? I would say that by having that security of knowing what you're going to do and going after it, and then having the trust that it'll work out, because it seems like there was a point where I was like really kind of nervous, like, oh crap, I'm not gonna have a paycheck if I don't have a job. But it worked out, and it seems like it works out for everyone if you go after it. It might not be your golden dream. So I think that by preparing early and being really prepared with what you want to do and your paperwork, your resume, and your confidence and your skills, that really ties over into your spiritual and mental with how you're going to handle your taking care of your family and all that stuff.
Well, the way I see it, based on your experience and the conversation that we've had today is that the way that you approached your career in the Air Force, in that you defined what success was going to look like for you, and you surrounded yourself by good people who supported you in that pursuit. You got smart on each of these different things. You said no to the things that you would not do. All of these different things that you did in the Air Force is exactly the same thing that's going to serve you and make you successful on the outside, and is the same for anybody that's listening to this podcast. Those are principles that are true in any context, not just in the Air Force.
So for me, my challenge was getting to the retirement. And I think I've seen throughout my time that the Air Force ebbs and flows with manning and opportunities and different things. And just because something's not available now, it doesn't mean it won't be available in a couple of years. That mechanism that got me back home and it got me to an active duty retirement, because I had already done the separation from active duty, I was pretty well prepared. I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was a 3-year stint, and I saved up my leave, and right now I'm on me time, terminal leave until the end of May.
Which is awesome. Very well deserved. It's been fascinating listening to you explain your career, the very many things that you've been able to do, both as an air battle manager, as a C-130 pilot. There are lots of other things that we barely even touched on. But before I let you go, I've got 2 more questions for you. First one is, if someone is interested in getting in touch with you to learn more about being an air battle manager or being a C-130 pilot, or maybe they're somebody who they're an officer on active duty and they want to do exactly what you did and cross-train from whatever they're in into being a pilot. If someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Email. I've had this address my entire time, but it's jungada, JUNGADA @hotmail.com.
Okay, awesome. We will link that in the show notes and encourage people to reach out to you there. All right, final question for you, Adam, if you don't mind. What does it mean to be an officer?
Well, I knew this is probably coming, something like this, some kind of philosophical question, but I think it's simply just doing your best, showing up. And sometimes you're not going to be the best, but if you work at it, you're going to be the best for yourself, for your family, for your peers, for your airmen that you're working with and for. And not too profound, but I think that if you want to succeed as an officer, you just do your best.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much, Adam. Lieutenant Colonel retired Adam Jung. Appreciate you taking the time to your thoughts and your experience, your time in the Air Force with us. It's been really a pleasure. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks. Thank you for the invite, Colin. It's an honor.
Awesome. Colin, thanks so much for putting that together. It was really fun. A lot of interesting stuff that we could explore there. Where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, I think I just want to highlight quickly some of the amazing things that Colonel Jung was able to do. I mean, he was involved in the Katrina response. He was involved in Operation Iraqi Freedom, C-130 instructor, advanced agent for Air Force One. He was a wing exec, on and on and on. He did so many things. What a fantastic career, and really appreciate that he took the time to share his experiences with us.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely not had a, quote, typical career. I mean, if there is such a thing, he definitely hasn't had that. Yeah,
and let's talk about that atypical career and kind of the way that he managed to have that career, how it came about. One of the things that stuck out for me from the interview was the role that a peer had in the formulation of and the shape of his career. His friend Kevin that was recommending to him all these different things that they should go do, and Colonel Jung was willing to go along with it. He trusted his peer. He trusted this mentor, and it turned out to be very successful for him. What are your thoughts on that there, Reed?
Yeah, I've absolutely seen that. The only thing that I also thought as he was going through that is how it can go the other direction. So as in life with anything, right, the people you choose to associate with can end up having a outsized influence on your life. And it's something parents worry about for their kids, right? You want to make sure they're hanging out with the right kids at school. It's something I attribute to significantly to my success in life. Is growing up, I had good people that were around me that helped me become a good person. At least I hope so. So I worry a little bit about, I guess not worry, just I think folks should be aware that they need to think seriously about who they're hitching their train to, because it can have significant impact on their career. Yes, that person may have that outsized personality that's fun to be around, but maybe fun in the wrong setting isn't the right thing to do. So just be considerate and deliberate in that step, I guess.
Yeah, I like that you're pointing out the fact that this is both a positive and a negative thing. And this is why networking is so important, that you surround yourself deliberately, to use your word, with people who are going to build you up and encourage you in positive directions.
Yeah. And the best way to do that is to be the kind of person that's going to do the same for others, right? So if you want a successful, happy career as defined by you, and that's something you and I have talked about a lot, right? You define what success looks like. Find people that are similarly minded. If you say you want to be a bachelor and deploy all the time, maybe you don't want to find a person who has a family and wants to stay home station all the time and follow their train 100%, right? You kind of need to find, even within our small tribes, you need to find that person that most emulates who you want to be and be that person as well.
Yeah. So on that note, defining your success, one of the best ways to do that is surround yourself with people who accept and encourage your definition of success. Now, they may pull you and push you in various different directions, but remember, you need to maintain your definition of success. It's not other people's, it's yours. And we saw that come to fruition in Colonel Jung's career. He had the choice of sticking it out and finishing his 20 years of active duty service or punching out early. And he looked around, saw what was going on, and made the very tough decision to separate from active duty prior to achieving his 20 years and receiving the pension.
Yeah, it's almost unheard of.
And it shows that you get to choose what success looks like for you. Now, happily, this actually worked out very well in Colonel Jung's favor, in that even though he had separated from active duty, he went into the Air Force Reserve, and through that was able to actually continue to accrue active duty time. He was an IMA. He was in Air Force ROTC with me as a VL pad, voluntary limited period of active duty. And by all that, was still able to reach 20 years of active service, but definitely not the quote unquote typical way of reaching an active duty retirement.
Yep. You got to define your success.
So those are the things that stuck out for me from this interview. What are your thoughts there, Reed?
So 2 things from me. So the first, he described how early on in his career, when he was looking at others, he felt a really keen desire to be accepted by them, to be part of them. And you can see it, especially when you look at someone in uniform, the badges, the medals, just the way they carry themselves, and you are striving to be a part of that group. And I remember very clearly, and I still feel to a large degree that pull, that desire to be accepted by my tribe. And a couple things I would say, he did this well, and he described how he would make sure and bring those people in. And that's my plea to those of us who are blessed to wear the uniform. When those brand new butter bars, or even airmen that come straight from basic, when they come to your units, they are desperately wanting to be part of your team. It is your responsibility to bring them in. Yes, there's going to be some, initial qualification training or mission qualification training. There's going to be some even, maybe borderline hazing, fun acceptance things that we do. This is part of our tradition and culture. And as long as it's done professionally and well, those things can be fun and really meaningful. But don't just give them grief to give them grief, right? Accept them in, bring them in. Those are the kinds of things that are going to create the environment where people will want to be. And if people want to be with you and in that environment, they will work hard for you. They will want to do the hard things. They'll put in the extra effort. That's what makes this job not a job. That's what makes it a career and a profession and a brotherhood. And so I definitely feel that pull. I've felt it. It has driven decisions. It continues to do so today. So bring those people in. I really liked how he did that, and he talked about how important that is.
Yeah, and to me, it's really just an extension of the previous conversation about defining success. That these people, these airmen that are, I guess, rushing your tribe, if you will, they are trying to define success in a similar way to the way that you have. And when you're dealing with junior enlisted airmen or brand new lieutenants, and you are a senior captain or an 04, 05, obviously it's no longer peer mentorship or peer leadership, but it still serves a very similar function in that you get to encourage those people in the direction of their success, much like you would want somebody else to do for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was the first thing I thought about, and I wanted to bring out a little bit. The next is this idea of firsts. So Colonel Jung talked about a number of things where he had the opportunity to be the first to stand up a squadron, the first to, do certain things, whether it was, arrive at Katrina, all those other types of things. Firsts can play a big role in a, quote, successful Air Force career. And I'm talking about, when it comes to being recognized among others. So I wanted to address it because it's one of the fickle things about our jobs that it's a really challenging thing. And so what I like to think about with firsts, or any experience that you have, when we're in garrison, it's like you're always practicing, right? You're never really in the game by and large. Now with distributed systems and people that, deploy, quote unquote, the second they walk into a Connex box, it's a different thing. But in general, most airmen, when they're in garrison at their bases, they're just, quote, doing practice, right? Just think of Allen Iverson here, right? Practice, talking about practice. All right. So, but every once in a while, they're going to call your number up and they're going to put you in the game. And it may be one of those firsts. It may be, like what happened to me, the first strikes in Syria, the first time aircraft flew across that border and conducted strikes in Syria. I was on shift. It was my turn. I got to plan that. So I imagine it's like sitting in the dugout, waiting for your turn. Coach calls your number. Hey, you're up. You pick a bat up, you walk up to the batter's box, and the pitch is coming your way. And the question is, are you going to be ready when that time comes? The other thing is, not everyone is going to get their number called, and not everyone is going to have a pitch thrown their way. You can't control that. All you can control is how you react to and are prepared for that situation when it comes. And it's tough. A lot of folks will get frustrated that they didn't get the opportunity for a stratification or some other big important opportunity that can happen. You can't control that kind of stuff sometimes. Sometimes it just doesn't go your way. So don't define your career by these things. Just be prepared so that if they come and you're ready.
Yeah. I think we've heard it before, and I'm speaking off the cuff here. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but what comes to mind is success is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah. And that's what I'm really trying to get to, right? These incredible, never happened before ever opportunities came, and he was prepared. And to be left wanting at a situation like that, I think would be a challenging experience. And I hope that doesn't happen. So just something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts, Reed. Again, thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Jung for sharing his experience We hope that you all have enjoyed this interview. Again, if you are interested in asking him your questions, you can reach out to him. His contact information is included in the show notes. You can also send your questions to us, and we'll be happy to facilitate contact with him. And any other questions that you might have, you're always welcome to engage with us on the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit. We are active on all those platforms and happy to help you and anybody else that's interested in your development on your journey as already a commissioned officer or someone who would like to be one.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Commission Ed.
Thank you for listening to Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. The views and opinions of the authors expressed herein do not state or reflect those of the government and shall not be used for advertising or product endorsement purposes. Mention of any specific commercial products, process, or service by trade name, trademark, manufacturer, or otherwise does not necessarily constitute nor imply its endorsement, recommendation, or favoring by the U.S. government. The mention of companies by name is solely for the purpose of discussion and should not be implied as endorsement.